All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to all of today's amazing presenters. I'm so honored to be closing out this session by speaking a little bit about Self-Portrait with a Harp, 18th century fashion, and my process with historically recreating a robe à l'anglaise. So before I begin, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Lydia. I'm a junior presenting from Colts Lake, New Jersey, and I decided to work with Polygence in order to continue pursuing my interests in fashion, culture, art history, and anthropology. Before I begin, I want to quickly thank my mentor, Desira, and Polygence as a platform for allowing me this growth opportunity. My project proposal was to research and analyze the painting Self-Portrait with a Harp, culminating in the recreation of a dress featured in the painting. This was accomplished by using a combination of historical and modern construction, but given my limited time here today, my goal is to hone in on the aspects of this project that were unique and new to me, and which differ from the modern process. From analysis to construction, the project spanned 5 months, in which I learned more about my craft than I ever had before. So to begin, I'll discuss my research. Self-Portrait with a Harp is a painting by Rose Adelaide Ducrot. She was the daughter of Joseph Ducrot, a royal painter alongside whom she debuted her artwork at the Paris Salon. Very obviously, she was a high-class socialite, and the depiction of music and literature in the background of her painting corroborate this well. Her status as an educated and wealthy woman with the ability to engage in fine arts is reflected in the sumptuous fabrics and the trendy style of her clothing, giving the exact year the painting was made. The dress she is wearing is called the robe à l'anglaise, a popular women's style in the mid to late 18th century. Dressing was very complicated at this time, involving multiple layers for support and function, such as a chemise for modesty, comfort, and cleanliness, stays to provide a conical shape and distribute the weight of the dress, a split rump to fan out the back of the gown, and more. In order to create a functional outer piece, all of those undergarments are needed. And prior to my experience with this dress, I had made multiple versions of everything you can see in the picture on the right. The dress itself was often made of printed cotton or silk, which were both expensive materials at the time. Boning runs up and down the bodice, which is attached to a pleated overskirt in the back. It opens in the front and is put on like a robe. Certain dresses such as this one also have a zone front, a decorative triangular panel sewn into the front bodice. This was something I would be attempting on my dress. Now let's get into the construction process. When sourcing materials, I had to find a realistic balance between historical accuracy, availability, and efficiency, something I think that I achieved well. While I used silk taffeta and linen for a socioeconomic and period-appropriate look, I used plastic boning on the inside of the dress, which can be seen placed in their channels in the picture on the right. In addition, I used my sewing machine for a majority of the straight seams on the dress, including hemming, connecting panels, and creating channels. This was important to me because while the dress would look and function exactly as it should, it could be completed in a reasonable amount of time and have a nice, clean finish. However, I made a point of hand sewing any visible stitches, and I think it definitely paid off in the details, which will be pictured on some of the slides moving forward. The process of patterning this dress was very involved, as I used a pattern from an extant garment and made changes to reach my desired outcome. By referencing patterns from other similar gowns, I was able to add length to the sleeves and create the zone front. Next, I made various mock-ups, or versions of the dress made from muslin fabric, which would allow me to ensure I understood the techniques and was satisfied with the projected outcome. During this stage, I also needed to tailor each piece to my exact measurements, something that every high-class woman would have had access to at the time. This was achieved through a repeated process of trying on the mock-up, pinning it on myself while wearing every single structural undergarment, taking the mock-up off, adjusting it, and trying it on again. The process would have been greatly simplified if I had not been trying to fix and wear the mock-up at the same time, but as I'm both the seamstress and the client in this situation, I had to wear 2 hats to get it all done. Here's a picture of the pattern I mainly used for this project. While I do understand that it is not the most comprehensive image to those unfamiliar with historical sewing, I actually think that illustrates the point that I'm trying to make very well. This pattern is wildly different from any pattern that would be used today, or even any pattern from a different period or geographic location. This is where research served me well, as I had enough of an understanding of the finished product to break down its pieces in a way that was comprehensible to me. This sharpened my skills of analysis and problem solving, and provided me with construction experience which will allow me to use even more complicated patterns in the future. There are many aspects of constructing this dress that I found interesting, 4 of which are listed here, but 2 of which vary greatly from modern couture techniques. As I mentioned earlier, a large amount of the process is done while wearing the dress, the sleeves being no different. Starting at the top of the shoulder and moving down the front, the sleeve is attached to make sure it is not twisted. However, to allow for additional movement, the sleeve itself is wider than the arm side, which is the area to which the sleeve is attached. Because of this, a pleat is created at the top of the shoulder, matching the two measurements and allowing it to be attached without gaps. To join the skirt, I pleated along with a fabric down to fit the back half of the bodice and hand sewed it against its hem, which was already lined and completed. This left a raw, unfinished edge on the inside of the bodice, something that I was unfamiliar with and at first uncomfortable doing, as it went against all of my prior training, but was actually quite customary during the time. Pictured is a detail of the center back joining of the bodice and skirt, an example of a place where hand stitching easily beats machine sewing for a human touch. Of course, making a dress so different from anything I had created before came with its troubles. For one thing, I wasn't able to take an 18th century robe à l'anglaise out of my closet to study its intricacies and make sure I was staying on track. And additionally, I couldn't consult my prior work and intuit what really needed to be changed when facing issues with fit or construction. Because of this, my troubleshooting resources were essential to the success of the project, and I had three main ones that were irreplaceable over the course of my research and construction. First was the American Duchess Guide to 18th Century Dressmaking by Lawrence Stawell and Abby Cox. American Duchess has always been an amazing resource to consult, and their easily accessible published content has been a lifesaver for me many times before. Specifically, I found their detailed hand stitching guides, step-by-step instructions, and troubleshooting index for tailoring to be invaluable for making sure everything fit well and was done correctly. This was used in conjunction with Patterns of Fashion by Janet Arnold, a highly coveted resource for fashion historians and seamstresses, and the book from which I got my pattern. Its technical illustrations and annotations work well together to provide a reliable point of reference for many eras and project types, and I would love to continue using Arnold's pattern database as I continue to expand my knowledge. And of course, Polygence's mentoring system connected me with my mentor, Desira, who taught me a lot about how I could effectively communicate my progress and struggles and help me along when I found myself unsure of where to go. At this point, I've given a comprehensive look into what it was like to engage in this process and will be moving on to my conclusions and retrospective thoughts about the project. But before I do so, it is time to reveal the dress. The rest of the images on the slideshow provide different perspectives of the final product, and I encourage you all to spot the features and details that I have discussed. So without further ado, here is the dress. Though I do not have an exact number, my guess is that I spent anywhere from 100 to 150 hours on the gown alone. And in addition to the garments needed to support it, a lot of time has been put into this project, and I am so unbelievably happy with how it turned out. Of course, completing this project impacted me in many ways, opening doors for more involved future endeavors and allowing me to work with fashion on a professional level. However, I want to make a point of explaining that this project, and fashion history as a whole, is far bigger than any one dress or any one period. Fashion is an essential part of art history, and without it, a central piece of the story is missing. Humans dress to reflect their values, their society, their thoughts, and their standards. And what is history or culture if not that? This dress is a reflection of beauty and artificiality, of powdered wigs and rouge, and of luxury in excess. But it is also representative of a class divide, a source of contention, and a revolution rising to the surface in France. Without this, we lose sight of what history really is. And what better way to demonstrate it than to get a glimpse at what is literally the very fabric of humanity itself? Because at the end of the day, humans have always been human, and there is no better way to appreciate the fashion and culture of the past than to bring it into the present. Thank you so much to everyone for listening and being here today, and a huge thank you to Polygence for giving me the opportunity to talk about this project, and to my mentor Desira for supporting me through every step. I will now hand the rest of my time over to questions.
Wow. Lydia, well, I think I speak for everyone when I say it's incredible that you did this dress by yourself and completed this project. And indeed, I am also curious, as some other audience members, how you initially got into fashion and sewing.
Thank you so much. This has been something that really I've always been interested in. As a kid, I would make dresses for my American Girl dolls based on like what time period they were from or what place they were from. And as I grew older, I realized that this was something that I could really run with. This was something that I could really make a big part of my life. And as someone who's always been committed to learning and to knowledge and to being as well-rounded of a person as I can, I've always tried to find a way to tie that interest in fashion into people and what they do and what they've always done. And I think that this is a really, really good intersection of those interests and a way for me to sort of express myself at the same time.
Got it. I think it's kind of incredible how much you get to know some of these historical periods through dresses. And I really loved how you connected the work you did to the cultural significance of it. We have another question here, and it says, you demonstrated a lot of knowledge on the subject of historical dress construction, and I was wondering if you could expand on how you use the combination of historical resources and the painting itself to gain an understanding of how you would need to approach the construction of the dress.
That's a great question. Thank you so much. For me personally, and for a lot of other historians and seamstresses, paintings have been a really invaluable resource, especially the further back in history you go, the more attention to detail and sort of realistic nature is portrayed in these paintings, and the less surviving garments that actually exist. So paintings have been really a primary source that have been really a huge contribution to what we know about these garments. And I think that sort of being able to balance this visual aspect, this artistic aspect of what's being portrayed in the painting, what feelings are we trying to like get across in this through this medium, right? And sort of combining that with the technical aspect, the patterns that have been drafted by Janet Arnold and by so many other fashion historians who have really paved the way to make this accessible knowledge to people who seek it, and to sort of balance that technical aspect with that artistic aspect, and to also at the same time use some of your creative freedom to make sure that your product is what you want it to be, and a good representation of, again, both the technical and artistical aspects of fashion as a whole.
That makes sense. Another question I have is, where did you learn sewing, and how do you pick up all the skills you needed to build this dress?
I am mostly self-taught. I've been sewing for as long as I can remember. So I started with just like a little hand sewing needle, and some thread, and like old t-shirts or pillowcases, whatever I could really find. And sort of growing into my abilities, growing into my skills, but also finding a direction to take them has been really important and conducive in my learning, because there are resources out there. There are so many amazing ways to learn this skill. And not only is it a skill that's not frequently practiced, it's a skill that was practiced before any of us were even here. You know, this is something that is so old, and so rooted in history. But I've really been able to utilize the resources that I've been able to find myself, but also, again, to have a project, sort of like this project, and to work with a program like Polygence, being able to connect with people that are also interested in what I'm interested in, being able to hear their wisdom and to understand their perspectives, and also to know that mistakes are really the only way to learn stuff like this. Like I could look at this dress and I could see the mistakes, I could see the things that I want to do better, but I know that without having made those mistakes, I would never improve. So I think that's the balance that you have to sort of strike.
Got it. And unless there are further questions, a final one from me, which is, what was the biggest challenge for you?
I think because it's such a tactile skill, I think translating this virtually with speaking with my mentor, with approaching resources through text and through even videos or websites, it is hard to translate into words what exactly needs to be done on a dress like this, and then again to translate those words into your work. And I think there is sort of a barrier there, but I think that having gotten practice with it like this, I've learned a lot of different ways to express what I'm having trouble with, to express what I have learned, and to, again, really make sure that these are easily accessible, and that there's a lot of open communication on where the problems are coming from and how we can fix those.
Wonderful. Well, Lydia, thank you so much for all your
Yeah.
work in the presentation. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks so much.